So a opinion piece was published by USA Today and across the country in many different news sources, newspapers. And this opinion piece is, for lack of better terminology, is entitled Defeat COVID-19 by Requiring Vaccination for All. It's not un-American, it's patriotic. So obviously the gist of this particular piece is about mandating vaccination for COVID-19 for everyone. I have to some degree stayed away from the vaccination question, the concerns that are out there, because I don't know the direction that vaccines are going to go. And by and large, you just don't see many, if any, successful novel coronavirus vaccines. The difficulty, my understanding, and I am in no way, shape, or form a medical expert. Once again, I am in no way, shape, or form a medically trained virologist, an immunologist, or anything like that. But even according to the CDC, and there again, I don't want to be a hypocrite and distrust them on one and trust them on another. But I'm using the CDC because, you know, in the United States right now, the CDC is kind of our go-to on things like coronavirus and how we should be responding to the coronavirus and what we should be doing. In the CDC's own words, common human coronaviruses. Now, whether or not we think COVID-19 is common is not germane to this particular argument. They've already made the argument that it is common because it's become a pandemic, and once something reaches the level of a pandemic in the eyes of the medical world, it's common. It has to be common for it to be at a pandemic level because it's got such a high rate of infection. So I don't know how else we can look at it. Here are some symptoms of a common human coronavirus: runny nose, sore throat, headache, fever, cough, general feeling of being unwell. Sounds like me every day at work. Most people get infected with one or more of these viruses at some point in their lives, like every year. This information applies to common human coronaviruses and should not be confused with coronavirus disease 2019. Now notice that. This is an addendum to the original essay, article, information piece that they put out. Here's some. Human coronaviruses can sometimes cause lower respiratory tract illnesses. Sounds an awful lot like COVID-19, such as pneumonia or bronchitis. This is more common in people with cardiopulmonary disease, people with weakened immune systems. Sounds like people who are affected by COVID-19. Infants and older adults. Transmission of common human coronaviruses. Common human coronaviruses usually spread from an infected person to others through the air by coughing and sneezing. Close personal contact, like touching or shaking hands. Touching an object or surface with the virus on it, then touching your mouth, nose, or eyes before washing your hands. So if we're not supposed to confuse the common human coronavirus with COVID-19, why are the common forms of transmission all the same? I know that's probably some form of logical fallacy, and I'm uneducated, but preventing viral respiratory infections. Protect yourself from getting sick. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth with unwashed hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. All this sound familiar? protect others when you are sick. Stay home while you are sick. Avoid close contact with others. Cover your mouth and nose when coughing or sneezing. Clean and disinfect objects and surfaces. Just wanted. We're working so hard to look at COVID-19 and set it off in its own category from all the other coronavirus illnesses. We want it to be different, but in so many ways, it operates like the regular coronaviruses. It is transmitted in so many ways, or in so many like ways. And yet, our own medical professionals, our medical experts here in the United States tell us that there is no cure by way of inoculation, by way of vaccine for the novel coronaviruses. One of those reasons is that it mutates so fast. Coronaviruses mutate quickly, very, very quickly. And we're also now starting to see studies or reports coming in of a mutating COVID-19 virus, and so it is performing just like all the other coronaviruses. And yet we're getting insistence that we're going to have a vaccine for this, and it's going to happen. And the entire gist of this essay that I'm talking about, or I'm going to be touching on here, is that we should all be forced to get it. Here in the United States, this doesn't touch on anybody else in the world, it touches strictly on the United States. That everyone in the United States should be injected with this vaccine. And the opening line of the opinion piece, and this opinion piece was written by 3 people. They're all from Case Western Reserve University. Dr. Michael Lettermanis, he's professor of medicine at Case Western. Maxwell J. Melman is professor of law at Case Western. And Dr. Stuart Younger is a professor of bioethics at Case Western. Now, Dr. Michael Letterman is not neutral as a doctor and a professor. He clearly has an anti-traditionalist, anti-conservative. It might be predominantly a anti-reactionary conservative position, but most of these people who take a position that's anti-traditional, anti-conservative have no idea what the differences are in the different conservative movements. So I guarantee you, if he's anti-reactionary conservatives, he's going to be anti-traditional conservative or paleo-conservative. Guarantee it. He also is very clearly aligned against President Trump. He's made many anti-Trump comments. He's blamed Trump for being accused Trump of being at war with the American people. In a tweet from July 30th, he says, "Ashamed and angry that the most robust scientific environment in the world was betrayed by an inept and fraudulent leadership and a fractured national health care infrastructure, I blame Trump for his pandemic COVID catastrophe." For this pandemic COVID catastrophe. And then he wrote, "How we miss President Obama." So there again, I don't have a problem with people having an agenda. Agendas are wonderful, as long as we're honest about them. I mean, imagine going on vacation and not having an agenda. That might be nice, but you have to have an agenda. so you can kind of know what you're going to be doing, unless you're like me and 99.9% of your vacations are really staycations, and you kind of have an idea of what you're going to do around the house when you're doing things. But everyone has an agenda, so I'm all right with that. Sir, Dr. Letterman, I don't care what your politics are, in the sense of your worldview is going to bring some impact to how you operate in the world and how you approach even your profession. So I don't believe in neutrality. It's impossible. No such thing as neutral approach to anything. Nobody can do that with their job at all. However, it's one thing to be neutral in your medical, or to have your worldview affect what you write and the things that you say, whether it be on social media or in your opinion pieces or in the online journal that you've started. It's another thing altogether when you begin to write your opinion pieces and you're starting to advocate for things like compulsory, and let's just be honest, compulsory means forced. It means forced. Compulsory vaccinations are forced. There's no way around it. You will get a vaccine. So these three, and Dr. Letterman, not letter, led, Dr. Letterman is apparently the predominant or the primary author of this piece. I'm not sure. The opening line is, to win the war against the novel coronavirus that has killed nearly 163,000 people in this country, the only answer is compulsory vaccination for all of us. And while the measures that will be necessary to defeat the coronavirus will seem draconian, even anti-American to some, we believe that there is no alternative. Simply put, getting vaccinated is going to be our patriotic duty. Now, I have talked expansively about Marxism. I have talked expansively about economic Marxism and social Marxism. I've referred numerous times to Saul Alinsky. I've referred numerous times to Antonio Gramsci. What I want to say again, and I will continue to expand on this in other pieces that I do, the term patriotic is a tool that's used by both the leftists and the right, by the rightists and the leftists. Progressive Marxism and white nationalists all believe in patriotic duty. Average Americans believe in a patriotic duty, but we have to take the context of that word and or the brunt of that word, and we have to understand what people are saying when they say patriotic and where that influence, what influence their belief system, their worldview has on the word patriotic as they use it. So we've already seen a demand from, just in the opening of this piece, a demand for compulsory vaccination, mandated forced vaccinations of all people, for COVID-19, and it's going to be called our patriotic duty. Now here's where the problem comes in with that phrase. That's very much a Marxist communist usage. Every single Marxist revolution, every single communist revolution in the entire world has always leaned heavily on, you must do your patriotic duty. The Soviet Union, as it grew and expanded, it was a patriotic duty of the citizens, of the people, of the People's Republic, to rat on one another. It was your duty. When you saw your neighbor doing something that went against what government said they were supposed to do. You were to rat on them. That was your patriotic duty. Um, we saw that in the United States with the inception of the See Something, Say Something right after September 11th of 2001, and then the formation of the Department of Homeland Security. Very much. See something, say something. It's your duty to rat on your neighbor. It's your patriotic duty as an American to rat on your neighbor. And if your neighbor is genuinely breaking the law, you should be intervening. But when you start to do things like talk about forced immunization, and make no mistake, it's forced. Like, we're going to come to your door and you will receive this vaccination. And they're going to kind of get into penalties here in a little bit. That's a problem. To call that your patriotic duty, in other words, we're going to make you do your patriotic duty. And they even say, one of the lines here is, the reason when an effective vaccine is available for COVID-19, it says when, I'm going to say if, ever, it will only defeat the pandemic if it is widely used, creating herd immunity. Now, it is important to note that during an epidemic, there is no threshold above which the protection conferred by herd immunity cannot be improved. Thus, the more people who are immunized, the lower the risk for all of us, including those who are not vaccinated. Nor is there an alternative to vaccine-induced herd immunity in a pandemic. Relying on enough people becoming infected and then immune is dangerous, as exemplified by the Swedish experience, where the COVID-19 mortality rate exceeds that of its more cautious neighbors. Broad induction of immunity in the population by immunization will be necessary to end this pandemic. In simple terms, a refusal to be vaccinated threatens the lives of others. So, first of all, they're playing fast and loose with herd immunity. Okay, you do not get herd immunity, natural herd immunity, by forced vaccination. You might get vaccinated herd immunity, but herd immunity and vaccinated herd immunity are two different things. And their attack on Sweden here is that they were idiots for doing it. Oh, well, wait a minute. How can you attack Sweden for allowing natural herd immunity to be their way of dealing with this when there is no vaccine yet? So let's think about this. They're pandering to their audience by attacking Sweden for not dealing with COVID-19 in a way that they thought that Sweden should, which is vaccines. And they don't talk about it. They just attack Sweden, and they can say what they want. That was an attack on Sweden's process, Sweden's methodology. But they're not really addressing it at all. The fact that there wasn't a vaccine available for Sweden to use. And even then, should Sweden have required its people to all be vaccinated? I don't think so. That's just me. But herd immunity works in that people all pass it around, they all develop natural antibodies, they all develop natural immunities, and people through that now become immune. It was the reason why smallpox was such a terrifying disease for the Native American population when white Europeans landed in North America. They didn't have a natural herd immunity to smallpox. Most Europeans did. It was miserable, but they developed it. It was the same thing with measles. Yes, we have a measles vaccine now. But we can all point back to things like TV shows like The Brady Bunch, those of us that are old enough, and remember that measles was kind of a thing. It was, you just dealt with it and you got over it. But we have this desire in America, especially, to be free of all diseases. No disease should ever affect us, and diseases build health. So you can call me crazy, but it's true. So here's where it really takes a dark turn. Here's how your patriotism is going to be used against you. Disincentives for non-compliance. Here's what Americans must do when a vaccine is ready. Or here's what America must do when a vaccine is ready. Make vaccinations free and easily accessible. Marxism, okay? See that? We're going to make it free and easily accessible. First of all, there's no such thing as free. Somebody's paying for that beast. Somebody will pay for that. Exempt only those with medical contraindications to immunizations. It is likely that more than one vaccine platform will prove effective, as was the case for polio vaccines, and as a result, medical conditions that prohibit all COVID-19 vaccines will be rare. In other words, you had better have a compelling medical reason why. Otherwise, you're going to get forced. So, here the positives, the disincentives. These are positives, right? Disincentives. Make them free and easily accessible. There again, no such thing as free. And easily accessible. Everything's easily accessible in the United States today, especially when you have people who are willing, including our own president, to send the military out door to door to start doing vaccinations. And remember, our president said our military will be used to go door to door, basically. I mean, he said that's not what they're going to do, but that was the implication of rapid deployment of vaccines across the country by our military. That's what the military does. Military doesn't like go set up a central location and say, okay, now everybody come over here if you want. So that sounds paranoid, I'm sure, to many of you, but we have to be aware. What we have here is a doctor and a lawyer and a doctor all saying easily accessible and free. We've got a president who's ready to deploy the military to do this, something that the military is not designed to do. The military, to quote a famous conservative commentator, the job of the military is to blow things up and break things, or destroy things and break things, kill people and blow things up, whatever, however you want to say it. Military shouldn't be used for this, and that would be one way to make things easily accessible. Here are the disincentives keep coming. Do not honor religious objections. The major religions do not officially oppose vaccinations. I don't care. As a Reformed, Calvinistic, Baptist, or a person who is Reformed, Calvinistic, and Baptistic in his approaches to his religious perspectives, I don't care what major religion says. If I tell you that I have a strong prohibition in my spirit, if you will, to use the language of the day, against getting vaccinated, you don't have the right to tell me that, well, other religions don't have a problem with it, so yours doesn't matter. And that's exactly what they're saying here. Do not honor religious objections. The major religions do not officially oppose vaccinations. So what? I know I said that already, but what about minor religions? Relatively unheard of, obscure ones. Either the First Amendment applies to all religion, or it doesn't apply to any religion. And if it doesn't apply to any religion, it doesn't apply to the press, it doesn't apply to anybody. You cannot tell me how to practice my religion. And if I'm telling you that I have a religious conviction against something like this, you can't make me do something. But they want them to. Do not allow objections for personal preference, which violate the social Do not allow objections for personal preference, which violate the social contract. What? What social contract? Whose social contract? Paleoconservative social contract? Libertarian social contract? Progressive leftist social contract? Which one? Constitutionally minded individual social contract? Like, which one? Whose perception of what the social contract is? There's something in this. And you have to remember that within Marxism, within leftist progressivism, the social contract, the means by which we bring force to bear through societal pressure on people to conform to what the state wants, is through the idea that we're all engaged in a social contract for the betterment of the people through the power of the state. That's the social contract. Now, do I know for a fact that's what he's talking about? No. So, but that's the language that's being used here. And then they go on to say, how can government and society ensure compliance with protective vaccines? Vaccine refusers could lose tax credits or be denied non-essential government benefits. Health insurers could levy higher premiums for those who, by refusing immunization, place themselves and others at risk, as is the case for smokers. Private businesses could refuse to employ or serve unvaccinated individuals. Schools could refuse to allow unimmunized children to attend classes. Public and commercial transit companies, airlines, trains, and buses could exclude refusers. Public and private auditoriums could require evidence of immunization for entry. Do you see where this is going? And I've made reference to this before. It's about your papers. You're going to have the papers. Now, it might be might actually be a paper. It might be a form. Maybe it's going to be some sort of identification that you're going to be able to carry on your smartphone. Some way to validate. Maybe it's going to be a wristband. Who that has information on it, and you zap the barcode on it, and it tells you. You know, like we see at the hospitals now. Do you get this? Now, I'm not a mark of the beast guy. But can you see why the radical fringe dispensationalism out there is going to see this as the mark of the beast? Do you understand why they're going to see this? And just because I don't agree with them on what the mark of the beast is and how it plays out in Scripture, doesn't mean this isn't a problem. This is problematic. I hate to use that term, but this is problematic. Okay, they're talking about limiting your access to things like a job if you refuse to be vaccinated. Wake up, America. They're coming for you. Immunization certification cards. How then should immunization be documented? A registry of immunization will be needed when names entered after immunization is completed. Adequate immunization may require more than a single vaccination, and the durability of protection by different vaccines may vary and may require periodic booster immunizations. Thus, immunized persons will need to receive expiration date stamp certification cards, which should be issued to all who are immunized in the country, whether here legally or not. Boy, all of a sudden they don't have a problem forcing illegal people, and when I illegal I mean people who come here illegally, to do something. Can't force them to come legally, but you can force them to be registered. So if we can force them to be registered, why can't we figure out if they're here legally or illegally, and then deal with them appropriately? I'm just out of curiosity. These measures might seem draconian and would be costly, but ensuring universal vaccination is a negligible sacrifice compared with the costs, deaths, and social upheaval that a sustained pandemic is having on our country. We acknowledge that the refusal to obey rules one considers unjust is an American tradition, but another cornerstone of the American tradition is that we come together when it's necessary. The best example of this was during the 2 world wars. Everyone contributed. No one was allowed to opt out merely because it conflicted with a sense of autonomy, and draft dodgers who refused to serve were subject to penalties. True, conscientious objectors could refuse to use weapons for religious reasons, but they were obligated to help out in other ways, serving in non-combatant roles. There are no such alternatives for vaccinations. I want to say here, based on just the political leanings of one of these authors, why didn't you mention the fact that draft dodgers during Vietnam were hailed as heroes? Let's remember that. The leftist progressives in the United States, the people who had started the cultural upheaval far before the sexual revolution of the mid to late 60s, also embraced as heroes the draft-dodging American men who refused to be embroiled in the Vietnam War. Now, the Vietnam War was a horrible, horrible mistake on the part of the United States government. We should have never been involved in. I think that's the case with a lot of wars that we've been involved in. We should never have been involved in a lot of the wars that we've been involved in. Doesn't make the men who were involved bad people. It just means it was bad decisions made by the powers that be. Oftentimes the powers that be being the same people who also are endorsing anti-American behavior like cultural upheaval. However, they conscientiously chose to talk about the patriotic spirit of people during World War I and World War II, that even though they were conscientious objectors, they were still part of doing what needed to be done to win those wars. And completely blew by the way that was handled during Vietnam. Now, we all have a bias, and that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. But it's hypocrisy to point out the wonderful way that people are forced as conscientious objectors to be involved in two episodes that back up your argument, but not talk about the other ones who you probably hailed as heroes at one point. We need to understand, people. They're going to come for us. They are going to come for us, and they're going to want to force us to be immunized. Where are you going to draw the line? Where are you going to finally say enough is enough and rise up and say, you've gone as far as you're going to go, you're turning back, or this is going to get nasty? I'm not talking about armed revolution, but we're seeing that happen in our country already. Armed revolution is here. Portland, Austin, Texas, saw it in Seattle. We're continuing to see it in Seattle. We're continuing to see it in places out on the East Coast. We're continuing to see it to some degree in Minneapolis and St. Paul. It's happening, okay? It's happening whether we like it or not. The leftists are at war with this country, and they're using COVID-19. They're using things like the death of George Floyd back in May to continue to drive that wedge and drive the revolution. Not spark it, drive it. They want to strip away from us our American ideals. They want to take away from us the God-ordained, the God-given pursuit of happiness, life, and liberty. They don't want us to have liberty. They none. No liberty, no medical freedom. Just think about that. No medical freedom. These are the people who would cry, "My body, my choice," except for those instances where we have determined that it can't be your body and your choice. This needs to be resisted. Ask yourselves, how many people do I know in my circle of friends? How many people do I know in my family that have had COVID-19? There again, it's a real disease. It is a very real disease. People have died. I'm not disputing that. People will probably continue to die. But people die every day from any number of things. None more so on a daily basis than the number of people who are killed by abortion alone in the United States on a daily basis. People are dying daily from everything. And we're only concerned about this one thing because this is the thing they have determined is going to be the wedge that they use to separate the patriots from the rapscallions. These doctors are dangerous. Not because they haven't done anything positive. This attorney is dangerous. Not because he's never done anything positive, but because he's using his they are using their expertise and appeal to authority logical fallacy to try and sway the public to be in agreement with what the government is going to do. And make no mistake. Excuse me. And make no mistake, if President Trump doesn't win in November, this is coming for everybody. If President Trump wins in November, it's coming for everybody. He's already on board with the vaccination process. Now, how far he's willing to go, we'll see. But they're coming for you. And a true patriot will resist mandatory forced immunization. Resist tyrants. Sic semper tyrannis. As always, thanks for watching the video. Thanks for being open-minded. Thanks for listening. I would ask that over here in the corner, somewhere on your screen, you hit the subscribe button. It's important, not for me, but because mainstream media, legacy media, isn't going to get the word out. They're not going to let people who don't toe the established line speak. So for the sake of liberty and for the sake of the defense of this nation, small little independent voices like mine need to be heard, especially the interviews. It's got very little to do with my commentary and a lot more to do with the interviews and the people who are affected when liberties are tread on. So once again, hit the subscribe button, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much.